Hello and welcome to episode 290 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm Jay Swinningham. This week, 30 years ago, in Iraqi Kurdistan, a village called Sheikh Wassan was attacked by chemical weapons. Hundreds were killed and all in the village were displaced. Today, though, solar microgrids are bringing dignity and hope to people who shouldn't have had to face the worst kind of heinous act imaginable.
Canada's former Environment Minister, Stephen Guilbeault, has resigned from cabinet after a recent pipeline deal that he says will make meeting Canada's climate obligations impossible. When Guilbeault was a Greenpeace activist, one of their stunts was attempting to install solar panels on the roof of a politician who didn't want them. Now that he's gone from cabinet, that might be the only strategy left to meet Canada's climate targets.
Zillow, the website where Americans start their search for a new home, recently added the climate risk for each property they list. But people complained because it lowered prices, just like when they decided to reveal the number of ghosts in each house.
A new program in North Carolina sees residents installing so-called super roofs that will not fly off into the air in a hurricane. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's hopefully not a super roof flying through the air.
All that and more on this edition of the Clean Energy Show.
All right, I got a hot take this week, James.
A hot take from Brian Stockton. Everyone sit down, pull over to the side of the road, stop the train you're on. Here we go.
A hot take about thermostats.
Okay.
And it's such a hot take. I'm going to split it up into two parts. This is going to be part one this week, part two next week.
A two-part hot take. Will part two stay lukewarm or be hot next week? We'll tune in to find out.
I don't know. It's if we talked about all of it this week, we'd end up talking about thermostats for an hour, and I don't think anybody wants to hear that.
Okay.
But I remember a couple of years ago, I complained on the podcast about hotel TVs because as time goes on, there's less control you have over your hotel TV. It used to be you'd be able to access a menu and change the color setting or, the brightness or whatever. And, the worst thing is they always have the smooth motion setting turned on, this frame interpolation feature that I hate, and Tom Cruise hates it. He made a whole video about this.
Well, Tom Cruise hates it, and Brian Stockton hates it. Well, then it must be bad.
But it'll take like a movie shot at 24 frames per second and turn it into 60 frames a second and make it look like a soap opera. Like it's a weird thing. And so for a couple of years now, I literally can't watch any movie in a hotel room because they have that setting, and the way the TVs are made now, you can't turn it off. A few years ago, I was able to do it a couple of times in a hotel, was able to find the menu setting and turn it off. And I was in Calgary not long ago. And anyway, the point I'm getting to about this is thermostats. There's now the same problem.
How do we go from TVs to thermostats? The same thing, you can't control them. I see. Okay.
You can't control them. And they all seem to be the same brand as well. Like it's LG for TVs. I forget what the actual brand is, but they always tend to look the same in hotels. And it used to be a few years ago, like there's a mode button. And so you get to choose, there's off, there's heat, there's cool, or there's auto. And auto switches from heating to cooling or whatever. Well, now the only two settings are off and auto. That's all you can select. So this past week when we were in Lake Louise, I wanted to turn the heat down overnight because, I like it cooler to sleep. You want it a couple of degrees cooler when you sleep. And so you turn it down a couple of degrees and then the air conditioning came on. And this is when it's it's minus 10, like it's below freezing outside. It's minus 10 degrees. And you don't want the air conditioning to come on in the middle of winter. Like, that's a horrible waste of electricity.
I have that problem in my Leaf back in the golden days when it had heat.
Yeah.
It would either go from air conditioning to heat. It was rare that this happened because the conditions were never quite right for it. But if you set the automatic temperature at, room temperature and suddenly it's a little warm, then the air conditioning comes on and you're blowing cold air, then it's blowing hot air.
Yeah.
It's both a waste.
And you're wasting power that you don't need to waste. So, if I'm in a hotel room and I want to turn it down a couple of degrees, like I can wait a couple of hours for it to get, so the only other, I could have turned it off and I guess that might have been the best strategy, but then you don't want to wake up at 3 a.m. and have it being freezing in there, which would have been possible. So Yeah, I don't know. This is the new thing in hotels. You can't properly control the thermostat. Just give me the control on the thermostat like I
can't
want
believe there's going to be a part 2 next week. It's
part
just
2 next week.
People
Thermostats
are on the edge of their seats. They'll be waiting for the download to come in before it comes in. And I can't wait to get part 2. So how was your trip back from the Rocky Mountains of Canada to the prairies of Canada here?
Yeah, it was great. There was no snow. The roads were all clear. Everything was full steam ahead.
Did you make it in one go, or did you stop halfway?
No, we ended up stopping in Cypress Hills for the night. We decided it was a bit too long.
Okay. Well, I was sitting in Costco, as I'm apt to do, and if you're disgusted by the fact that we go to Costco, be reassured that our Costco membership was allowed to expire at the first of the month, for now anyway. But we get some things there, and we stock up on them, and we save money. And then saving money is important for James. So I was sitting there waiting for my partner to get some things and that she wanted to get. And it was cold. The winter is arrived where we are. It's kind of bitterly so in some respects. And I had the heat on in the car, and all of a sudden I smelled this horrible smell of burning.
Uh-oh.
And I thought, oh God, the heater is on fire, or the battery's on fire. Something horrible is happening with my car.
Mm-hmm.
And this lasted for a good 20 seconds before I looked to my left, and 2 cars over, it wasn't a burning vehicle. It was a diesel truck with like a megaphone style muffler that they put on to be extra loud and possibly bypass the diesel settings.
Yeah.
And some guy just hit the remote switch from inside the store, and his truck started running. And that's what I breathed. And it occurred to me, this guy who came out, was a father, had a family. He, his wife, his children are breathing this stuff on purpose more than anyone else.
Yeah.
And it's really, it's childish and stupid to begin with. Okay. We all know that. Anyone who listens to this show can agree with that. But it's dangerous, and they have no, like, diesel is one of the worst things you can breathe.
Yeah.
The exhaust from diesel, and yet he's made it actually worse than it was. So, another shocking news, Brian, I discovered that I'm not the height that I thought I was, and I've come to accept that I'm a different height. 15 years ago, I had a nurse come in to my home for life insurance policy. We were looking at changing life insurance, and she measured me at 6'1", and I thought, because I'm overweight, I thought maybe she was just kind of being generous with the height, so I didn't believe it. But she had me at 6'1". And then yesterday, I went to a pre-surgical screening, and they measured me at 6'1". And our friend Jay said, he stood next to me about a couple of years ago and said, "You're 6'1". And I said, "No, really? No." But this could have I could have lived a different life, Brian, because I've always admired and looked up to people who were 6'1". I thought it was a whole different category of people to be that extra inch over that 6-foot mark. And who knows what I've wasted in my life.
Well, and of course, you tend to shrink as you get older. So, maybe you were 6'2" at some point, James.
Good Lord, Brian. Who knows? I might have been an NBA candidate at one point. Who knows?
Well, I went to like a back specialist a couple of years ago. I don't know if I talked about this on the podcast, but sort of a orthopedic, I forget what you call it, but a guy that works on, if you've got a bad back, you go to him. And he did this exercise where you get in the room and he measures you at the start of the session. And then you do a bunch of things, and, he urges you to stretch and blah, blah, blah. And then he measures you again at the end of the session, and you're taller. And it's this neat little carnival trick that he has to show. So it could really depend on your posture and everything, how you measure.
Yeah. And I've been watching a lot of weight loss videos on YouTube because of what I have coming up. And somebody was going through one of these list videos, all the benefits of losing weight. And they said, if you lose 100 pounds, 100 pounds less is 2% gain in fuel economy on a car. And that would be maybe even more true for an electric car because they're more efficient. And weight really is important in electric cars. So there you go, people. Lose a couple pounds, and it'll save you money not only on what you eat, perhaps, but what you pay for fuel, whether it's electric or combustion fuel. So I thought that was interesting. And Cat Lady on Patreon, she's one of our Patreon supporters, said on Patreon that she ordered the book Here Comes the Sun by Bill McKibben. And she says, I hope I learned something. And I hope you do too, because it's a book, you want to learn if you get a book after all. Here's a description of the book. Here Comes the Sun tells the story of the sudden spike in power from the sun and wind and the desperate fight of fossil fuel industry and their politicians to hold this new power at bay, from the everyday citizens who installed solar panels equal to a third of Pakistan's electric grid, which we've talked about a lot on the show, in a year to, that was just 1 year, to the world's sixth largest economy, California, nearly halving its use of natural gas in the last 2 years. Bill McKibben traces the arrival of plentiful, inexpensive solar energy, and he's somebody I've been following for a while on social media. And here's a clip of Bill talking about ethanol for corn and the folly of that being used for road transportation.
On that 30 million acres, we produce about 3% of all the energy we use in America. If you take that same land, well, I was this time last year on a farm in Illinois, richest topsoil in the world, used for growing corn. And the farmer who was with me was putting in some solar panels. So he said, look at this acre. I use it to grow corn, which gets turned into ethanol, enough in a year to drive my Ford F-150 pickup about 25,000 miles. Now look at this acre over here. I'm converting it to solar panels. It will produce enough electrons in a year to drive my Ford F-150 Lightning, the EV version of the same truck, not 25,000 miles, but about 700,000 miles, okay? We could take that 30 million acres that we're currently using for ethanol, cover it with solar panels, and that would be enough to produce all the energy used in America.
That's pretty mic drop stuff. That's, it's not like we haven't talked about this a million times on the show, but I get so frustrated when I hear people talking about biofuels and ethanol because it's so stupid. Why are people afraid of solar? Why is it just, it can't possibly work for things? Like, it's just stupid. Solar panels on our roofs do, a portion of our transportation ourselves, our small little panels on our small little roofs. I once calculated 17,000 kilometers per year of driving in my Leaf. Of course, it gets less than that if you drive a pickup truck, but I don't have a very big roof that faces south, so it's pretty significant what you could do with solar compared to ethanol. And that's you'd have to plant a new crop every year to get the 25,000, right?
Yeah, that's right.
You don't plant new solar panels every year. They just keep giving you 700,000 or maybe slightly reducing from that over the years, but it goes on for 25, 30 years. And it's incredible what people just don't get.
And it's a similar issue with hydrogen because there's just so much refining and transportation involved in hydrogen. Whereas if you just put up a solar panel, you can put it straight into the tank of your EV if you want to. It's ridiculously more simple.
That's such a weird thing to do because Alberta is our oil capital province of Canada, the main province that produces the fossil fuels. And at the time, this was a few years, this was before solar is what it is today.
Yeah.
They were up there. I don't think they drilled holes into the roof. I don't think
so,
they did that. But they went through the exercise of doing it, which was quite hilarious and yet a little shocking as well.
Yeah, well, it is. His wife was home and she said she was scared it was a home invasion or something. He was arrested, but they didn't press charges. To their credit, charges.
They should have did it on Christmas Eve. They would have thought it was Santa.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, as we talked about it at the time, so 2021, he was appointed the environment minister in the Trudeau government. And it was quite something for an activist of his credibility to be in that kind of important position of power. But of course, at the time we knew, okay, there's always going to be compromises. You're never going to be able to do everything you want to do in that position. But he had a huge influence. There were some excellent policies that were created under the Trudeau government. And of course, those are now tending to be kind of dismantled. There's a new deal with Alberta to build a new pipeline, which we probably don't need, out to the West Coast. And so Guilbeault had enough that this was too much of a compromise and too much against his principles. He was no longer the environment minister. He was the minister of culture or something. I'm not sure, but
Minister of Culture. So
recently there'd been a cabinet shift, but he was in that position for 4 years, which is a long time.
Really villainized by fossil fuel politicians in Western Canada that had the fossil fuels. He was, they partied when he resigned from cabinet. Yeah. They were very happy about it. And they saw him as just the Satan of posing everything. But he did not He did not, like you say, he compromised like crazy.
Yeah.
He did not do everything he wanted to do, obviously, if he was a Greenpeace activist.
Yeah. Anyway, so that is the latest. And yeah, sadly, the environment stuff is getting watered down in Canada with a new prime minister and looking to, make some compromises with Alberta.
Yeah, and there's a big separatist movement in Alberta. I think it's like 25 or even 30% sometimes of people wanting to join the United States or just become their own country. And the United States will let us put fossil fuel pipelines through. Well, not if a Biden gets elected there.
Mm-hmm.
You can't put them up overnight. By the time, who knows what will happen in the next presidential election? You might have somebody, and hopefully you do, that opposes such things.
And my understanding of the deal is that this just opens the door. It's supposed to be a private pipeline being built in Canada. So this is
a partnership, though.
Yeah,
partnership makes me queasy because it means that I have to pay for some of it.
Yes. But
not that I pay taxes.
Will the private sector actually pony up their half of it in the dying days of fossil fuels remains to be seen.
And none of the pipeline companies, and this is pertinent to everything we talk about, want to build a pipeline because they know that demand is not there. And if they build it, then they're not going to be profitable. And the line that you hear all the time is fossil fuels are going to grow to 2050. And that's said like it's fact around here all the time in Canada. And we see analysis all the time, credible, and the big analysis that say, no, it's not going to grow into 2050. You're stupid as hell if you believe that, because you're fooling yourself. It's not the case. And the main thing is solar displaces some fossil fuels used in electricity generation, but more than anything, road transportation. You can look at China as an example, and India is going that way too, that they're just displacing their use of fossil fuels, and in home heating too. But that's, for road transportation, we are approaching the S-curve of adoption in a lot of places. And I see clips of the Clean Energy Cat has made an appearance, but he refuses to speak on the podcast, but know that he loves you all and is happy to be here, according to his tale. All right, Brian, I always talk about how many press releases we get. We get a lot of press releases, especially when our show inches up the charts. Sometimes we get one an hour, and sometimes they just come in. Most of the time, they just come in overnight so that I can look at them in the morning. But most of them are useless because they're just startups, obscure startups who want attention and want interviews, and we don't really do interviews. But one came in, and I thought, hey, that's interesting. I'm not going to do an interview, but I'm going to take the press release and turn it into a story because it was really fascinating. But it's a sad story. The history of it is very sad. Let's go back to 1987 in Iraq.
But Iraq's frantic desire to stamp out this nagging opposition led to an action that shocked the world. 2 jets swooped low to bomb a Kurdish town recently taken by Iran. An Iranian army camera caught the moment of impact, not high explosives, but cyanide gas. In less time than it took Iranian helicopters to fly over Halabja, some 5,000 civilians were killed.
It was a very sad story, and it was kind of overshadowed by a plane crash, a passenger plane crash in Detroit, and people firing upon the U.S. warship. But small village in Iraqi Kurdistan, Sheikh Wasan, is a place scarred by one of the earliest chemical attacks against Kurdish civilians. And now, nearly 4 decades later, it's become a symbol of something very different: clean energy, dignity, and a bit of long overdue justice. We've talked about this in Africa, and I love stories like this because it's not a big picture story. It's a democratization of energy story where it is empowering for people. For somebody who has half a solar panel in an African village that has no grid connection or anything, they can suddenly become a barber and have a business to recharge the trimmers that use on people's hair. That's one of the things that I recognize. But in this village, they had no regular electricity at all. And back on August 16th, 1987, I was a university student, Iraqi forces attacked the Belsan Valley with mustard gas and nerve agents, which is just one of the most terrible things you can imagine. This happened about 8 months before the Halabja massacre most people know about. In Sheikh Wasan alone, 211 civilians were killed, mostly women, kids, and the elderly. Survivors were detained, families were separated, and many children never made it back to that village. 30 years later, though, the same streets that once saw chaos and suffering are now lit, literally, by clean, off-grid solar power. The Ranga Foundation and its founder, Idris Nechirvan Barzani, are behind this transformation, and they sent us a press release. Barzani has quietly become a major force for renewable energy in post-conflict areas, which I have a lot of respect for. The foundation installed 72 complete solar systems, 432 high-efficiency solar panels in total, and every home now has 24-hour electricity. So they've gone from a place that nobody wanted to live and abandoned, and now they're coming back. So, however, only 281 residents have returned to the village, but for them, this solar panels are life-changing. Barzani describes the project not as a charity, but as a restitution, an act of justice. One resident put it even more clearly: "We lost entire families in the gas. Now our children study under electric light," which is something you can't do. You're confined to daylight hours if you don't have electricity. Since 2013, Ranga has been converting neglected rural communities into solar-powered ones, creating jobs, boosting local agriculture, and filling a gap left by Baghdad and the international community. And this is just another great story about solar and how, easy it is, especially now when it's so cheap. You remember that things are getting cheaper and cheaper, and batteries are cheaper and cheaper, which they put into these microgrids. My son had a good friend from Iraq, and his family were instrumental in his decision to get into the career that he's chosen, civil engineering, and they've always been very kind to our family, so I feel like I have a connection, small connection to Iraq. Solar isn't just about emissions. In this case, it's about the memory of the village, the dignity in rebuilding what was taken away from them. They're getting it back from solar, and that's just, it's not just about emissions. It's about so many other things that can bring human dignity and hope to people around the world, especially the poorer communities of the world.
Yeah, energy independence. You're far less likely to have energy independence if you're relying on fossil fuels. So that's always a great story. Okay, so moving on, we've been talking about insurance a bit lately on the show because this is one of the things that's challenging in the age of climate change because we have more disasters fueled by more frequent bad weather caused from climate change. So there's another story from Bloomberg here this week about catastrophe bonds being issued in North Carolina as extra insurance for people who have installed a so-called super roof. So this is a kind of insurance that is, again, preventative, like what we talked about last week with the idea of doing climate risk assessments. And by the way, I just started watching the new season of This Old House on PBS, and they're rebuilding some homes that were damaged by Hurricane Helene. That's how they're starting off the season.
From the ground up or just repairing them?
Just repairing them. Like a lot of the houses were washed away, depending on where you are. Like this is, rivers flooding and overflowing, and, many houses were washed away. But the ones they're featuring in the show remain standing. Like they had a ton of water, but just because of the way they were built, they happened to be built particularly sturdy. And things like, I think there's one house that had 4 fireplaces in it. So you have all those brick fireplaces and chimneys it ends up kind of anchoring the house and preventing it from getting washed away with the flood water. And again, like depending on how the foundation was built. So yeah, unfortunately, a lot of the houses were completely lost, but what they're featuring on This Old House are ones that could be saved and rebuilt. So that's always interesting. So there's places in North Carolina where you can't get normal insurance anymore, which is a topic that comes up on the show quite a lot. So you can get it then from the North Carolina Insurance Underwriting Association, which is the state-created insurer of last resort for coastal properties. So this is often what happens.
I believe California does that too, for wildfires, because of wildfires.
Yeah. And this organization, well, they then also have to try and mitigate their risks because they don't want to just end up insuring a bunch of properties that get wiped away. So they've come up with this thing called a catastrophe bond, which is a specific fundraising thing. You issue the bond and people can invest in it. And the hope is that it doesn't pay out and it ends up being a good investment for the people to invest in the bond. But in order to make it work, again, they don't want to just keep paying out for a catastrophe. They've started a program where they will pay people to upgrade their roofs to a thing called a super roof, which won't get blown away. So in a hurricane, often your roof can blow off. So, well, what do? You reinforce it, and they refer to it as a super roof. So if no major losses occur each year, $2 million is returned to the NCIUA, and then it's earmarked exclusively to incentivize the homeowners to install these roofs and make them more wind resistant. And then the annual pricing on the bond will reset to reflect the changing exposure. So hopefully roofs get upgraded, less is paid out, and then the bond can change to reflect that. So when this first started happening, people were skeptical. They thought it was some kind of scam because they started offering money to people to upgrade their roofs, and everyone didn't understand and thought it might be a scam.
Yeah, because I see stuff like that around here for windows all the time.
Yeah. And you wonder, is this a scam? So it costs roughly $3,400 more than a standard roof. And so a lot of people didn't want to do it. So they started offering these incentives. But again, because people were skeptical, they started offering more. So they started offering $6,000 for something that's only going to cost $3,400. And again,
really?
Yeah, it's a subsidy. Basically, if you want to do your roof, you end up getting kind of extra money out of it. And then they increased it to $10,000. And again,
really?
This is, it's free money to people because they know that in the long run, the math works better if they don't have to pay out insurance claims on roofs getting blown away. So after every storm, they checked the results on this. They found that these fortified homes with the super roof had 60% fewer claims than ones that were just regular code compliant. So this is above code is what they're doing, and 20 to 30% fewer claims when it's a lower severity storm. So yeah, it's a subsidy for your roof, but with the goal of making this insurance pay out less and making it, more palatable for the state-backed insurance that they don't, just end up going bankrupt.
Yeah. Well, that's such a good opportunity there.
Yeah.
I hope people are smart enough to take advantage of that. I know a lot of people don't trust the government in some parts of the United States and are very wary of such things, but you got to be smart.
Yeah.
Especially in hurricane country. You got to be smart, especially when, anywhere where insurance is tough. You got to do your best.
So yeah, when they started upping the figure offered, people did start to the uptake increased. But anyway, there's a related story here from Clean Technica. 2024 had an average of 11 hours of electricity interruptions in the U.S., twice the annual average, and hurricanes was the major factor for this. Mm-hmm. So, a 10-year high in average power outages in the U.S. in 2024, and it was mostly because of the hurricanes.
Wow. So if, as batteries get less and the solar gets more doable, I would love to have a strong solar super roof.
Yeah.
With battery backup and weather those storms a lot better and not be so stressed about them.
Yeah.
Of course, you'd also be tempted to stay.
Yeah, not leave.
That might be dangerous, but in some cases, it might be dangerous.
But yeah, so 11 hours of average electricity interruptions in 2024 for Americans, which definitely seems high. Like we would maybe have a couple of hours a year, I think.
Well, yeah. Depends where you live.
It depends, yeah.
I keep an eye on these things. There's parts of the city that is, has 3 hours here and there.
Yeah.
And it's our grid, though. We're not upgrading our grid. We're being cheap about it because the government doesn't want to increase the cost of living. So we're just going to all live in the dark, I guess.
Yeah. And our cottage property has much more frequent power interruptions. Yeah. I think, the power only comes in on one cable or something, and it's often going down. So it's probably more than 11 hours out of the cottage. So hopefully, if we build a new cottage, we can put in a battery.
If. Is that where we're at, Brian?
When we build a new cottage.
When? Okay, you scared me.
We can hopefully put in a new battery.
I thought you had completely derailed the whole master plan there for a second. I'm going to stick with this insurance thing now because Zillow, the biggest real estate website in the United States, millions of people browse homes for sale there. They check the prices, they see the photos. We have an equivalent here in Canada that we use here, and we get a sense of what a house might be worth. But because so many buyers start their search on Zillow, any change the company makes has a huge impact on the housing market. And recently, this year, Zillow added climate risk scores to listings, which I find to be a great and interesting idea.
Yeah.
Because this is a thing now. Whether you live in Burbank or Florida or North Carolina, or parts of the UK or wherever, in Australia as well, wildfire risks. There's all kinds of climate risks in the Western world that we talk about frequently on the show. And that should be a factor in where you live. Like I live in a neighborhood here that varies topographically, relatively speaking, because we're a flat prairie land here.
Yeah.
But there are places in my neighborhood here that flood fairly regularly during thunderstorms, because they're the low-lying area. It would be good to know that, especially if you weren't really savvy like it. I would think about that now, but maybe 25 years ago, I wouldn't think about that. And you would get flooded and not, you may not have wanted to live there.
Yeah, I'd never thought about it at the time, but our house is on the high part of the street, which we only noticed once we bought it and we're living in it for a while, and you get a big thunderstorm. It's pretty flat, but we're on the highest part of the street, which is super important.
These scores showed how vulnerable a home might be to flooding, wildfire, extreme heat. That's another thing, extreme heat.
Yeah.
There are places that are concrete deserts, like they're just concrete and asphalt. And you get, a few degrees higher there if you don't have vegetation. So that's something that maybe you wouldn't think about when you're buying a house. You just want a nice house. You just want a nice neighborhood. But these things maybe would warn you if you were smart about it. Even poor air quality. Hello, that's what we've been monitoring here where I live due to two industries. And I tell you, I wouldn't live here if I had the choice, Brian Stockton. I would pick up stake and move. And anyway, the idea was to help buyers understand long-term risks before making one of the biggest financial decisions of their lives. But real estate agents and some homeowners complained, say the scores looked random and they couldn't be challenged and they scared off buyers. So I guess in one way, they're lowering the prices, which the real estate agents didn't care for. But I mean, come on, if you actually cared about your clients, on the other hand, they're thinking the scores aren't accurate. That's the criticism. But that might be the weak part where you go to criticize if you wanted to criticize. But so in response, Zillow deleted the in-house climate info. But now, instead of showing the data directly, Zillow simply links to First Street, the nonprofit that originally provided the risk ratings that went onto the site, but now you have to click off site to get, you can still get the risk rating, but you have to click off site to get it, which is better than nothing, I guess. At least they're making people think about it. The fact that that link is there will hopefully make people think about the climate risks associated with the property and this particular neighborhood you're in. First Street CEO warns, however, that this move leaves buyers flying blind. He says the risks don't go away. They just become problems that families discover after they've bought the house when insurance is too expensive or too late to get. Climate damage in the United States hit $182 billion last year, and home insurance is getting harder to find in high-risk states, as you just mentioned. So if you're house hunting today, you'll have to check the climate risk yourself, but anyone who's out there, and many of us are potential homeowners or cottage buyers or things like that, think about that. Do some research into it as much as you can. If you're house hunting today, check the climate risks yourself. The information's out there, Brian, but it's just no longer up front in the United States where everyone can see it.
Yeah, and be aware of upgrades you can do, like making a super roof that won't fly off, or, fire mitigation things that you can do around your houses, which are, quickly becoming code in those fire-prone places. All right, if you want to contact us, please let us know. Drop us an email, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. You can leave a voicemail, speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow. You could also make a voicemail, record a little voice memo, and email it to us as well. And the Clean Energy Show is an independent podcast that is made possible by our Patreon supporters. So please visit us there, patreon.com/cleanenergyshow, and you can support the podcast for as little as $1 a month. Although, hey, maybe think about a little more than that.
Thank you. And coming up next is the lightning round.
So, when I ask, what is Odoo? What comes to mind? Well, Odoo is a bit of everything. Odoo is a suite of business management software that some people say is like fertilizer because of the way it promotes growth. But some people also say Odoo is like a magic beanstalk because it grows with your company and is also magically affordable. But then again, you could look at Odoo in terms of how its individual software programs are a lot like building blocks. I mean, whatever your business needs. Manufacturing, accounting, HR programs, you can build a custom software suite that's perfect for your company. So, what is Odoo? Well, I guess Odoo is a bit of everything. Odoo is a fertilizer, magic beanstalk building blocks for business. Yeah, that's it. Which means that Odoo is exactly what every business needs. Learn more and sign up now at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com.
Morning, Zoe. Got donuts.
Jeff Bridges, why are you still living above our garage?
Well, I dig the mattress, and I want to be in a T-Mobile commercial like you. Teach me, Saldana.
Oh, no, I'm not really prepared. I couldn't possibly. At T-Mobile, get the new iPhone 17 Pro on them. It's designed to be the most powerful iPhone yet and has the ultimate pro camera system.
Wow, impressive. Let me try. T-Mobile is the best place to get iPhone 17 Pro because they've got the best network.
Nice, Jeffrey.
You heard them. T-Mobile is the best place to get the new iPhone 17 Pro on us with eligible trade-in in any condition.
So, what are we having for lunch?
Dude, my work here is done.
The 24 monthly bill credits on experience beyond for well-qualified customers plus tax and $35 device connection charge. Credits end and balance due if you pay off earlier. Cancel. Finance agreement iPhone 17 Pro 256 gigs, $1,099.99 and new line minimum $100 plus a month plan with auto pay plus taxes and fees required. Best mobile network in the U.S. based on analysis by Ookla Speed Test Intelligence data 1H 2025. Visit T-Mobile.com.
Time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
The Dominican Republic has switched on the 162.6 megawatts Cotoperí Solar Complex, which is a complex thing to say. It is the largest PV installation in Central America and the Caribbean. So the Dominican Republic is winning with the biggest solar installation. Didn't know that. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Because you don't hear, I don't know if we've ever even mentioned the Dominican Republic before.
Yeah, probably not.
So there you go. That's a good thing. Recent press reports say Hinkley C nuclear reactor in the United Kingdom has a 50 million pound fish deterrent mechanism there, and it's only saving the lives of 0.083 salmon per year.
Okay, so they're spending 50 million pounds to save fish, but it's, saving like one fish.
0.08 salmon. That is the most expensive salmon saved. And it's not even the whole salmon. The tail is missing. So that's a failure. I admire their, we don't often talk about nuclear, we talk about dams, hydro, but not nuclear killing fish.
Well, what about those three-eyed fish like on The Simpsons? Is it going to save those?
I guess there's so much radiation, but that's, of course, false. So don't think I'm trashing nuclear necessarily. Yeah, Europe, EVs have jumped 35% year on year, and petrol cars, as they call them there, are down 15%. This is a percentage of new cars sold, 35% year-on-year increase for EVs, and petrol cars are down 15%, and diesel cars are down 22%, which is kind of a trend in Europe since the Volkswagen diesel scandal. People thought they were doing good with diesel, not necessarily. Japanese media says BYD, the Chinese mammoth manufacturer of automobiles, mostly EVs, all have a plug of some sort, is planning to release the Sea Lion Model 6 DMI there for $25,500 US equivalent. So that's going to disrupt the Japanese automakers.
Yeah. The Chinese automakers are getting into Japan, and the Japanese automakers should be nervous.
And they are laggards. So if they start losing market share to EVs because they're making them right, they're making them at the right price from China, then that could wake them up. But maybe it might be a little too late. Time for a CES Fast Fact. An estimated 230 billion shrimp of various species are alive in farms at every given moment, compared to the 779 million pigs, 1.55 billion cattle alive at any one time, 33 billion chickens are alive at any one time, and 125 billion farmed fish are alive at any one time. And we know what beef does to the climate and how much emissions per acre and per pound of protein that you're buying with beef. It's not a good thing. And people are slowly starting to wake up to that and trying to skip beef a little bit, at least a little bit. Tesla has only sold around 100 cars since entering the world's largest country, India, in July. So it's a slow start for them, but we'll see how that goes. China's Shanghai Institute of Applied Physics announced in November that it successfully turned thorium into a usable uranium fuel inside a working molten salt reactor. This is the first real-world test showing thorium fuel can work in a liquid-fueled reactor, giving scientists important new data and helping prove that a thorium-based nuclear fuel cycle is possible. And that story was covered in Power magazine. Time for another CES Fast Fact. The most energy-efficient 12 U.S. red states, that is the 12 most energy-efficient red states, the United States, use 2.6 times the electricity per person as the worst 9 blue states. So, red states, you're wasteful. You're not thinking. You know, you're going to church every Sunday, but then you're wrecking God's planet that he made for you in 7 days, or something like that. Maybe it was 6. He rested on the 7th or something. I can't remember. Also, per capita electricity use of Texas is 2.67 times that of California. So each person in Texas uses 2.67 times any one person in California on average.
That's wild. I can't imagine.
It is wild.
How that would be or why that would be, because it's not like California is some, bastion of conservatism when it comes to electricity use. North America, we all use a lot of power.
Yeah. I mean, are the homes, like 5,000 square feet in every Texas suburb? I mean, what's going on there? It's
could be that.
I don't know. When we find out, I'm going to talk about it, okay? When something comes across our desk. And for God's sake, drop us a letter, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. Trump is forcing a 63-year-old jalopy coal plant in Michigan to keep on burning. They were going to shut it down. He's forcing it to keep burning because it's clean, beautiful coal. It raises electricity costs for Michigan's electricity ratepayers by $113 million per year and counting. And no one in Michigan wanted it, not the utilities, nobody. Nobody wanted this. But
it's a win-win, high prices and high pollution.
Sure. Loblaws, that's the main Canadian grocery company, has been quietly running its first commercial pilot demonstration of a hydrogen-powered Class 8 truck. That's like what we would call a semi-trailer in North America. In British Columbia, the province of British Columbia on the west coast there, since mid-October of this year. So, interesting. I know they have electric trucks that go shorter distances from their distribution centers to the grocery stores. And we don't hear a lot about that, but that's, one of those trucking things that's been working. Latest share of new car sales being EVs in the world. We have updated numbers. We like to talk about this on the show from time to time. Norway's at 97.4% of their new vehicle sales have a plug. They're pretty much accomplished, mission accomplished, 2025.
Yeah, this is the last year you'll be allowed to buy a fossil fuel car in Norway.
And are the streets burning? Is there riots? Is the economy falling apart? No, Brian, it is not.
Everything looks great.
And Nepal,
and I want to move there.
We might have to. Well, so I'm going to check the air pollution monitors before I do. Nepal is number 2 right now. 76% of new vehicles sold in Nepal are electric, which is, we've talked about before in the show here, and there's reasons for that. Denmark is at 73%. Ethiopia is at 60%. We've talked about their reasons, and it has to do with energy independence and strict government policy. China is ticked up to 58.7%. So it's had to hit 50% and slowed down a little bit because of policy changes.
And of course, it's the largest car market in the world. So not that the other ones aren't important, but even though it's not as big as Norway percentage-wise, my gosh, like the number of electric vehicles being sold in China right now, absolutely staggering.
And honestly, I don't know why anyone in China would buy a combustion vehicle. Yeah. It seems like a fool's errand to do that because you're going to start seeing less fueling stations, and the options are, there's no limit to the options.
Yeah.
Like you can't blame that, and you can't blame the charging infrastructure because it seems to be quite robust.
Really inexpensive EVs for sale in China.
Albania Albania's at 57%. Alabama's probably sitting around 8%.
Yeah,
it's my guess. Somebody write me if you know. Netherlands is at 40%, 40.2%. And finally this week, though, Bill Gates. is under fire, as you know, for a memo he released ahead of COP30, the UN climate conference in Brazil, last month, where he downplayed the dangers of climate change and argued that climate change action competes with global health. Which, am I missing something? If I had a brain injury, like what's going on with that?
Yeah,
like,
and
how does... We've seen so much evidence on the show of the opposite, the exact opposite.
And Bill Gates has invested in a lot of clean energy projects we've talked about here on the show. There was like these vertical wind turbines, I think was the most recent one that Bill Gates is a backer of.
Maybe he's hepped up on the same stuff that Elon Musk is hepped up on. What's that called? I can't remember what these guys are doing.
Is it money?
Yeah, money. It's money. They're inhaling money. I'd do it too if I could. Climate scientist Michael Mann, he's one of the foremost climate scientists. I'm sure you've heard of him. He wasn't having it, though. He's asking, what world is Gates living in? He says climate and health aren't trade-offs. Warming actually makes disease and poverty worse. God dang it, we know that. He also points out that Gates keeps promoting unproven tech fixes while investing in fossil fuel-linked solutions like carbon capture and geoengineering schemes, which most of the climate world really thinks is a bad idea. Meanwhile, he downplays clean energy we can actually deploy right now. He does downplaying what's actually going on, what's actually working. You can look at numbers.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on. Is he just not that smart? Is he only good at one thing, making a bad operating system? Like, what's going on here? Man's message is simple. There is no reboot button for the planet, so stop burning fossil fuels.
And on that declaration, that is our show for this week. Contact us on social media, Clean Energy Pod, patreon.com/Clean Energy Pod. And remember to hit that follow or subscribe button wherever you're listening to this podcast.
And our Patreon, patreon.com/Clean Energy Pod. Lots of benefits there. Brian's his first show of the month, so I get to thank some of our clean energy supporters on Patreon. At certain levels, you get a shout out once a month. Green Bastard, Brent Routley, Barb Armstrong, John Hayes, Wes S., Noah Cook, Denny and Linda, Jonathan Dick, Bob Eaton, Josh Engen, Sean Ennis, Andy Fessler, Roshan Gervais, H., Sean Hines, Timo Kellenberger, Peter O'Donnell, Weldon Penner, Robu, Joe Thorshine, Landon Yu, and Richard W. Thank you so much to everyone who is supporting our podcast. It makes it happen. And if you haven't, please consider doing so. We'll see you again for our bonus podcast coming up shortly.
Yeah, and we'll see you next week.